Hello and welcome. My name is Timothy Allen. I am the moderator for the Pennsylvania Jural Assembly. If you're watching this, this is actually going to be number 3 in the series called Public versus Private. I'm going to talk about bankruptcies of the United States of America. I'm also going to be talking about the Jural Assemblies. I'm going to be talking about the states and how things are moving along right now. This is very important. So, number one, it's very important that you remain in the private. The best way to stay in the private is to join your state jural assembly. You participate in that assembly. When you participate in the assembly, then you become able to basically be a part of that assembly and all that it offers, because it offers a lot. And I mean it offers a lot, and we will be explaining that later on. So basically, I want to talk about, let's talk about the bankruptcies real quick. In the last video, I mentioned that Ben Franklin had went to France, and he actually in 1775 borrowed the 1.4 million francs, brought it back to the United States to do war with England. What they're not telling you is that the French were actually part of Great Britain, that Great Britain had conquered the French. So by borrowing money from the French, he was actually borrowing money from Britain. That's what happens in that place, is that the bankers were the Rothschilds. One brother took care of England, one brother took care of France. So it all came out of the same pockets. Nevertheless, Ben Franklin borrowed this money and they could not pay it back. So in 1791, the corporate United States of America, under the second Constitution, the Constitution of the United States of America, filed for bankruptcy. Now, a government that files for bankruptcy, a bankruptcy lasts 70 years. And so the people, 70 years, let's just go 70 years forward. When you go 70 years forward, you end up in the Civil War. So 1861, 70 years later, the British start another war. And it's the British that started the Civil War. And they did it on purpose. They have been behind every cotton picking war that we've ever been in. They're complete morons. These British monarchs have been the tyrants behind every kind of conceivable fraud that you can think of for years, for hundreds and hundreds of years. So they're finally going to meet their day very soon, we hope. In that 1861, the United States of America corporate had to file bankruptcy again. So move 70 years forward, and you come up to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And just before that, the United States again went into bankruptcy. And the third and final bankruptcy of the United States of America, because you can only file bankruptcy as a country 3 times before the bankers want to take all your assets. So in 1999, November the 2nd, the United States of America came out of the third bankruptcy. Now, this was being watched by some very particular people that I'm not going to go into right now. If you want to watch the series called Castles, War Castles, that will explain the bankruptcies better than I am right now. I'm just giving you a short overview. So if you go back in time, what we're doing is we have 3 bankruptcies. The first one, 1791. The second, 1861. The third actually came out of bankruptcy in November of 1999. And you remember, if you were alive that day, it was the Bush-Gore election day. It was a Tuesday. And they had the election, and all of a sudden, nobody was left in Washington, D.C. The people actually left Washington, D.C. over this controversy, which they had created with the election. And they said, we have to go to Florida, and the Supreme Court has to rule on who becomes the president. Well, 90 days later, on February the 2nd, George Bush was appointed, not elected. He was appointed the president by the Supreme Court, basically. So there was nobody in Washington, D.C. because everybody had to leave Washington, D.C. because the bankruptcy had finished. So what happened was, when they filed for bankruptcy in 1791, the United States could no longer hold the post office. Somebody else who was a sovereign had to hold the post office. So, because no country in bankruptcy could have their post office. So the King of England came into the District of Columbia to hold the post office. Now you have to understand that all commerce runs through the post office. So all commerce was running through the king. So for 210 years plus, this went on. So when this finished in November the 2nd, 1999, the king literally was kicked out of the United States. 3 years later, in 2004, I believe it was, the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, was kicked out of the United States because they are British. They are run by Britain. So they were kicked out of the United States, and that's why you do not make your checks out to the Internal Revenue Service any longer. You make them out to the U.S. Treasury, because the U.S. Treasury is run by the International Monetary Fund. So it's all a bunch of fraud, but that's what's going on. The thing is, whenever I say it's a whole bunch of fraud, it's a fraud only because of the people who are still in commerce. So it's a fraud to the people who are private. It's not a fraud if you're still in commerce, because you're still in commerce. Sorry. So if you have a voter's registration, you're still in commerce. Now, going back, what happened was, okay, so moving forward, let's do this. In 2015, Barack Obama declared bankruptcy for the municipal corporation, the one that was created after the Civil War. So that municipal corporation went into bankruptcy in July of 2015. It came out of bankruptcy, I should say it was finished. The municipal government was defunct, gone, October of 2018. That's why the government was shut down right after Christmas, because there was no corporation. There was no money. It was all gone. So the corporation had to shut down. That's why they're shut down right now. It's not because of any other reason. It's because the municipal corporation declared bankruptcy and they're gone. So the territorial corporation is still operating. They're borrowing money. They're making debt to pay debt. It's an absolute fiasco. So at any rate, the United States of America ceased to exist the way it should have been on November 2nd, 1999, when it came out of bankruptcy. And then this corporation was filed bankruptcy in July of 2015. The second corporation, which is the territorial corporation, President Trump put into Chapter 11, which is a reorganization in Chapter 11. Chapter 7 is defunct, gone. Chapter 11 is reorganization. And President Trump in May of 2017 declared bankruptcy on the territorial United States government. So there have been three governments. One is federal. That's the states of states. That's operated by your Jural assemblies. And the Jural assemblies haven't been operating the government because the people were lied to. So you've had corporate governments under the Constitution of the United States of America and under the second Constitution after the Civil War, which is the Constitution of the United States, all capital letters. That one is gone. It was bankrupted. The first one, the territorial corporation, is in bankruptcy. So the only thing that's keeping us afloat is the federal Constitution, which is under the Articles of Confederation. It's actually under the Articles of Confederation, which is the corporate on the land jurisdiction people, but without the Jural assemblies, it does not work. You have to get your Jural assemblies working. The Jural assemblies, the people, operate the government. The government does not tell people what to do. The people tell the government what to do. That's what the federal government does. We, the people. Because we are a federation, which created a confederation. Well, without the federation and the Jural assemblies, the confederation doesn't work. So wake up, wake up, wake up. We need people to step up to the Jural assemblies. ASAP. So, what happened? Back in 1776, Pennsylvania created a constitution. That constitution was never ratified by the people. None of the 13 colonies ratified the constitutions according to the people. So they had no authority to create a new constitution. Without the state constitutions, there cannot be a federal constitution. There cannot be a territorial corporation constitution. So you ended up with British rule because the people didn't know what the hell was going on. But we know what's going on now, thanks to Dr. Rivera. So, in 2011, Pennsylvania brought forward the Constitution of Pennsylvania. Brought forward that Constitution of Pennsylvania and the seal of the Supreme Court. When that happened, it was ratified by the people. They took that paperwork, they sent it off to the United Postal Union in Bern, Switzerland. They sent it off to The Hague in the Netherlands, the International Court of Justice on the private side. They sent it to the United Nations. The United Nations didn't care. They're a bunch of wimps, whining blowbags. But what happened was incredible from my perspective. 2 weeks later, one of the fellas got a call from the Pentagon. They didn't send anything to the Pentagon. What's the Pentagon calling for? Well, the Pentagon called. And they said, can you do this for the rest of the 13 colonies? And the guy on the phone said, what do I want to do that for? So the people on the phone said, because there are $4 quadrillion in derivatives that we think are going to go upside down, and if they do, it'll bankrupt the United States of America, and there is no government to stop that bankruptcy, so the bankers will own everything in the United States. So this fella took a couple of weeks to think about it, called back to Pentagon and said, okay, I'll do it. In 2013, 9 of the 13 colonies brought forward their constitutions and their seals. In 2015, all 13 had come forward, and we actually had the first Continental Congress ever in the United States. The first legitimate, because without those constitutions being ratified by the people, Nothing that they did was legitimate. So finally, you had a working government after 250 years. This is the first time. This is the first government. It's brand new, folks. You got to get this. It's brand new. It's based upon the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union. But it's the first time that it's ever actually worked the way it's supposed to. And the Jural assemblies make it work. It's the Jural assemblies that make this thing work. Okay, so I'm running out of time here. In 2013, 9 of the 13 came forward. 2015, they had a Continental Congress. They sent all the paperwork off to everybody around the planet. When the head gets stuff, 143 nations know what's going on in the United States. They know we have a new government. They know it. The United Nations has never made war with a sovereign country, and we are a sovereign country. So, in March of 2018, 39 out of 50 were brought forward, and that's very important because now you have 39 states on board with ratified constitutions. As of today, it's February the 3rd, 2019. We're almost there. We need about half a dozen, and we're going to be in. When that's done, then there's a plan in place. I can't talk about everything. There's a plan in place. When that plan comes forward, the United States of America, for the first time ever, because we've been under British control, because the people didn't know any better. It was all fraud. But for the first time ever, we will actually have our country. And I'm not saying we're going to have our country back. No, I'm saying for the first time, we will actually have a country. Okay. So, I hope that you're enjoying the series. And that's going to be the end of this video. And I thank you for watching. Join your Jural Assembly. Go to PennsylvaniaAssembly.org. I will be the person that you are answering to, or will be answering your email. So send your emails. Tell me what state you're in. If you can, give me your county. They like to know that. And I will forward your information on to the people who you need to get in contact with. All right? So appreciate it. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.